Welcome to the Compassionate Recovery Podcast, the show where we explore healing from sex and porn addiction, betrayal, infidelity, substance use, and everything in between. Wherever you are on your healing journey, I'm glad you're here. Welcome. My name is Jeremy Mast. I'm a licensed therapist. I'm a certified sex addiction therapist, a certified partner trauma therapist. I'm also the clinical director and founder at the Center for Integrative Change, a therapy and coaching practice dedicated to helping those struggling with and affected by sex and porn addiction, betrayal, infidelity, and addictions. We help them transform their lives. Recovery is not a straight line. We need compassion at every step in the way. So, wherever you are, now that you're here, pull up a chair, take a breath, and let's dive in. All right, everyone, welcome back for part 2 of our conversation with Jenean Cervantes. Jenean is a licensed therapist and all-around extraordinarily wonderful human being. So I'm really glad that you're here again. Thanks for joining me again for part 2 of this conversation. We talked last time about coercive control and what that means in intimate relationships. But I wonder, for those of us, our listeners who might just be joining us for the first time, I wonder if you could sort of summarize what you mean by that, and then we can explore what that might have to do with sex addiction, porn addiction, infidelity, betrayal trauma, all that stuff.
Yeah, so thank you again for having me, Jeremy. So coercive control, like I had said in the last episode, is these consistent patterns, consistent acts or behaviors with the purpose of taking away someone's freedom or controlling someone's narrative. And people might use pressure or fear, intimidation, shame, rules that kind of wear you down, or things that wear you down and take over this sense of choice. Sometimes in extreme cases, we're looking at abuse and physical violence or sexual violence or things like that. A lot of what we talked about in the last episode is ways in which this looks small, ways in which this sort of looks small in the beginning, and how that can escalate or how that can grow over time. People in coercive relationships are going to experience a lack of self-trust, confusion, uncertainty about their reality, feeling exhausted, feeling drained, feeling tired a lot, feeling like they are walking on eggshells. Maybe this sense of fear happens a lot. They might be, more hypervigilant, more jumpy, fear of how their partner's going to react or respond to things, maybe quieter in their presence than they normally would be in other spaces. Very concerned with, and they may also communicate in ways that don't include themselves. So they might communicate in a way that only communicates about their partner's feelings about something, or thoughts or ideas. What do you think about going to that party? Well, Jeremy doesn't really like parties, or he's really not that kind of, so like he's not very social or whatever. I'm not talking about whether or not I want to go to the party. I'm talking about how my partner feels about parties, right? So those are examples of that are subtle, where that person might feel distracted or avoidant, or they may not be listening to their body sometimes because they're just so numb or so drained from being in that space consistently.
Hmm. That's a great summary. And for the record, I do like parties, but I'm very awkward. So I love that summary. That's so helpful. So, folks who are listening to this show, they're probably dealing with betrayal trauma, which we talked a lot about in the previous episodes with Jordan. They might be struggling with some kind of an addiction, a sex or porn addiction, or they might be struggling to recover from some kind of infidelity or violation of trust in their intimate relationship.
Mhm.
Can you say more about what coercive control might have to do with sex addiction, porn addiction, betrayal trauma. How does that show up in these kinds of circumstances and situations?
Yeah. Well, controlling someone's narrative is a huge part of infidelity, right? So, someone saying, Dr. Romani talks about this a lot, where partners will have this feeling and they will know, their bodies will know, and then they ask their partners about it, and it's dismissed naturally, gaslighting, dismissal, um, denying their sense of reality. This is why so much confusion exists. And the partners often know, but there's this sense of, if it's true, then what does that mean, right? That we're not quite ready on an unconscious level. We're not quite ready to face that.
Mm,
If it's true that they are lying to me or that they're cheating, what does that mean? Well, that means that I have to break up with them, or I have to end my marriage, or that means that I am someone who is gullible, or I'm someone who attached myself to somebody that lies to me. So it breaks down these ideas that they have about their identity, their relationship. And so sometimes they just may not be ready to face that on its own. That might exist on its own. And then the other
mm,
part of this is, then I have a partner who's reinforcing that I'm crazy. I'm crazy pants, right? I'm imagining it. It's not happening. Or if I remember something in an argument, I might say, "Oh, you said this," and then they might be like, "I didn't say that." Or they might utilize the feeling against me. You're so insecure. You're so
mhm.
insecure. You're so jealous. And those are ways in which it's kind of weaponizing our insecurities, our vulnerabilities against us. And then my space becomes smaller. I no longer feel safe even bringing up that I have a concern about something, because what will happen is that it will be denied, dismissed, or worse, I'll be called something that I really don't like about myself, which is this idea that I'm overreacting or being insecure,
Mm.
when really my body is telling me the truth, right? And so every time we deny that truth inside of ourselves, that's what I was talking about in the last episode. That's part of what creates this lack of self-trust. It's that relationship I have with myself is now shifted, in where I have to self-abandon. I have to swallow my intuition in order to stay in this relationship. I'm going to choose belonging over myself.
Yeah, belonging at the expense of self-abandonment and my own sense of identity and self-worth.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're alluding to in describing the psychological wound of betrayal trauma, that continual self-abandonment, that continual gaslighting, that and by gaslighting we mean telling someone that their reality is not true, it's not real. What they are experiencing is not true for them,
Hmm.
right? And you also alluded to other forms of blame, like blame shifting, shifting the blame back onto the person who is being controlled, being abused, scapegoating, blaming you for everything, making you the problem. We
Right.
talked about that a little bit again in the previous episode, which if you haven't checked that out, please go back and listen to that episode. All of these are ways, and flat out denial. I think that's an underlooked one. All of these subtle ways that partners who have yet to have made some kind of discovery of their partner's secret sexual behaviors. There are these flashes of intuition, these warning signs that often come up throughout what may be years,
Hmm.
that the controlling partner, or I'll just call him the betraying partner in this case, continually protects against that secret coming out by engaging in all these ways of weaponizing blame and coercive control.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, another thing that I wanted to bring up in the last episode that I forgot about was asking ourselves, does it feel like I have the space to be angry with my partner in my relationship? Does it feel safe to be angry with my partner? That is it's a really good test of safety in a relationship is whether or not we can be angry with each other in a healthy way, of course, right? But it kind of similar with, parent-child is when kids are at school all day and they have to behave really well and their parent picks them up and then they go nuts, right? And then they're all kinds of upset. It's like they feel safe with their parent because they're able to let go of all of their emotions and feelings. And not that we should offload all of our emotions and feelings onto our partner, but a good indicator that I don't feel safe in my relationship is if I can't ever be angry or frustrated with my partner. And I feel because that will trigger them or that will activate them, and then I might pay the consequence for that later, or it doesn't feel safe because some aspect of that anger might be weaponized or utilized against me in some way, right? Because anger, it lets us know when a boundary's been crossed, when a need is going unmet, or when something feels just wildly unfair. And those are all healthy ways to experience anger in a relationship. And when you have someone who is, participating in withholding, lying, infidelity, addiction, it's going to activate all of those points in which one should be angry. One has the right to be angry, right? But if we don't feel safe expressing it, it might be because coercive control is present.
Mm. So, wow, that's really insightful. So, if I'm in a relationship where I suspect that there's coercive control and I get angry, can you say more about that litmus test that you mentioned? If I get angry, can you say more about what response might I expect or anticipate from my partner if I'm in a relationship like this?
Well, again, it's going to kind of go back to maybe blame, or you're overreacting, or even in some coercive relationships, you might see somebody actively trying to get a response out of you. And then when you have that response, they say, see, this is you being out of control, or this is you being very, y- you know, unreasonable or even abusive. You're being abusive to me right now. Your anger is abusive to me. You're making me feel small, right? I'm the victim of your anger.
Yeah, that's how they shift the blame, right? They turn the tables on you, turning themselves into the abused and the victim here when in reality they're engaging in victimization. They're
Mm,
victimizing their partner. That's
hmm
so common. And we see this a lot, right? In these kinds of relationship dynamics when partners before any kind of discovery, before the secret's out, betraying partners will engage in this behavior over and over and over again in order to protect their secret.
hmm hmm Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, going back to that, controlling the narrative, the repetition, if I say something to my partner enough, then that becomes their reality. I think there's probably a lot of that as well with something more covert like porn addiction, where that time is time I just need to have for myself. I'm just a person who takes a lot of time for themselves. And if you're questioning it, you just really don't understand me, or you're just really, not knowing how to care for me or love me, or I feel like I can't ever ask for this thing or whatever it is, right? And so that might be something that happens is I'm allowed to, or I feel entitled to take up this space, and if you don't allow me to have that space, then, you're the one who is maybe controlling or, limiting me or making my space smaller.
I think you're getting at something that is so tragic, but also something that I hear a lot from partners who've been betrayed when they're in that understandable, valid anger.
Mm.
Not only are they blamed and called abusive even when they get angry, but how they express that anger is used against them.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Right.
Right. So they get angry and but their controlling partner calls them out on how they're expressing their anger in
Mhm,
such a way that is dismissive or completely invalidating. Instead of meeting that anger as we teach clients to do in therapy with
mhm,
understanding, openness, and validation.
mhm. Yes. And when you're working with a partner with sex addiction or porn addiction, a lot of times we don't see as much of this expression of anger in or expression of emotions or expression of needs. Some of that is harbored or the way in which that might be experienced is through the addiction. And so when their partner has these emotions felt in that moment or experiencing them or taking up space with them, it can be seen as overbearing or threatening in some way because how they've been taking up space is so private, but yet so harmful, right, to the
Mhm.
relationship.
Oh yeah.
And and so this other way of experiencing it is like, oh, we experience needs and emotions together. Or, oh, this it can feel to that partner that has been controlling that narrative, like their anger or their emotion is so aggressive or so much. But a big part of the reason that they might feel that way is because they take up so little space with vulnerability and honesty and their needs and experiencing and expressing them, right? In a way that is relational. The way that they've been taking up space with their needs is non-relational and, abusive.
Oh, 100%. So, oh boy, there's so many directions we can go here. I'm I'm wondering though, you know, on the other side of discovery, when some kind of discovery has been made, when a betrayed partner discovers some to some extent the addiction, the secret behavior, the maybe the substance use, whatever it might be. Okay, there's the affair. Okay, you know, and the first priority is safety and stabilization, stabilizing the relationship from the upheaval, the crisis in the relationship after that discovery, in the wake of that discovery. Can you say more about how addressing coercive control and the associated behaviors, how do we address those behaviors after discovery so as to promote safety and stabilization in the relationship in the early phase of treatment, people getting help?
Yeah, well, we're teaching someone in many ways how to do something that they've never done before, but is now really required of them. I think that's one of the hardest parts about post-disclosure is how drastically the relationship shifts and how quickly partners have to adjust in order to keep the relationship. But I would say one of the first things is, the coercive partner is going to have to hold space in a way that they've never held space before. They're going to have to listen in a way that they've never listened before. For them, being relational has meant control, right? That is how I relate. That is how I have relationships. I have relationships by controlling others because it's the only way I feel safe having them. And in this situation, once they've been discovered, there's relatively there's very little that they can control at that point. And that's why you see the trickle disclosure is because there is so little experience with the facing of it and the vulnerability of it that all at once feels so overwhelming to say everything I've done, and tell you the whole truth. I can only do it if I can control pieces of this narrative in small increments over time, right? Or if you discover something else, and then I'll tell you a little bit more. And that can be so dysreg. That's more of the coercive control, or more of the abuse continuing for the betrayed partner. It's so dysregulating, right?
Mm.
Because now I really have no idea what is true. And I've spent all this time ruminating and thinking about when I was being lied to, and now it's continuing to happen. So I think
Oh,
one of
yeah.
the first things is like that's so important in that dynamic is teaching that person how to hold space for their vulnerability, for their shame, and the other person's emotions at the same time. And that it's going to be a process. They're not going to get it right because they really haven't been doing it, right? So it's going to take time, and that means being willing to lean in and to face these parts of themselves that, have been in many ways experienced as, this is probably an unlovable part of me. I feel shame around this part of me, right? And so I'm so unable to hold it, and that's what all of these projections have been, and the blame has been. I've been shifting all of that onto my partner because I cannot possibly hold this part of myself and be lovable at the same time. I can only be lovable if I'm split. And so now these parts of them have to be integrated because there's no other choice. If they want to stay in the
Yeah.
relationship, then we have to face them. And holding their partner's emotions and their anger and their pain about what they've done and been doing to them, and being able to hold themselves at the same time, I think is the most difficult challenge in these kinds of relationships.
Hmm. Yeah. So after a situation, especially one where there's this trickle truthing, like you were saying, trickle truthing, staggered disclosure, wherein the betrayed partner makes a discovery, the betraying partner will own up to just a piece of the truth,
Mhm.
just enough to get the heat off a little bit, but the betrayed partner still feels like something's not adding up. It doesn't make sense. And so there's continued digging, investigating, seeking out of the truth, more of the truth. And so the betrayed partner finds some more information, confronts the betraying partner cops to a little bit more, and so on and so forth, until which time they knock on our door, right, to get help. And that's why we really stress throughout the healing process with betrayal, coming to a shared understanding of all of the facts involved with the infidelity or the acting out sexually, whether that be through full disclosure or some other means that is appropriate. So you were talking about what that can look like with the betraying partner, that betraying partner learning to take responsibility
Yeah.
for
Mhm.
owning his feelings, for making shifts in his behavior, so that the blame shifting, the gaslighting, the denial, the minimization, the justification, all
Mhm.
of that weaponization
Mhm.
stops,
Mhm.
right? Because we hear that time and time and again, that for betrayed partners, the sexual behaviors are an excruciating betrayal, right?
Yeah,
But even more harmful is the deception involved, the gaslighting, the lying, the manipulation, right?
correct. Because there's
So
two
that,
injuries in
yeah.
that, right? There's the injury of the act of what you did in that betrayal, and then there's the injury of eroding my self-trust. And that is difficult, is in some cases is more difficult to forgive our partners for, because there it's sort of an act against the self in a way in which I've already been, sort of empathizing or compensating or understanding, and then for that blame to go on me when you knew the whole time what the truth was. That feels like two betrayals.
1,000%. Yeah, and I want to be clear. Some of these defense mechanisms that betraying partners engage in are unconscious, but that doesn't mean that they don't have any idea about what they're doing,
Yeah,
because they do.
yeah.
They do. And they need to start taking responsibility for that, to make seismic shifts in their behavior, shifting away from all of that destructive behavior toward being open, being vulnerable, as you said, learning to empathize with their partners, even if it's going to feel a little awkward or even robotic at first because they haven't done it before. Every time we learn to do something new, like a new skill, it's going to feel a little robotic and awkward at first. But what begins as cognitive empathy, eventually, if you're doing it right, okay, and you do the work, it's going to travel down into your heart and be genuine, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, what does recovery from, you've talked about this quite a good bit already, but take us through some of the initial steps of healing for betrayed partners in recovery, for partners who are trying to recover from coercive control. What does
Mhm.
that look like with regard to addiction, with regard to infidelity?
Yeah, so if we're doing this with a partner or even without, you can still do this with an individual ther therapist too, is there's kind of a going back in a way and revalidating yourself. So that's one of the things I like to do with clients is, you know, let's go back to the scene of the crime of self-abandonment, and what might we say to ourselves instead there, or what's something we can reassure ourselves of now, or what's something that we can start to do or steps we can start to take to rebuild that relationship with ourselves, because two trusts are rebuilding. There's the betrayed partner rebuilding their trust with themselves, and then there's the relational trust that's being rebuilt, right? And sometimes those things can, ideally, those things can coincide and work together. That when the person who injured me is able to take full responsibility and ownership, all those times when they offloaded that responsibility onto me because of their shame, all that time that where they blamed me, if they're able to now take responsibility for the ways in which they caused harm, that trust in the relationship and that trust with myself, it gets a little bit easier. But I think that first and foremost, right, we want to make sure that that person feels like they can go back and find that internal safety and remember that they have choice in boundaries and creating boundaries for themselves in the future of places that they won't go again in terms of like um when I see this kind of behavior, giving that back to my partner or not allowing myself to invest to the point of self-betrayal in this way again. They're identifying those kinds of things for that person so that they can understand the point where it felt like they were losing their voice or it felt like they were losing themselves. I think that's really important. Not because of course, they're to blame for what happened, but because there are often these areas where, oh yeah, I knew and I kept going past that point anyway, or there was a part of me that did, and that's okay. And I have compassion for that. And of course I trusted my partner, right? And of course I loved, and that's okay. And maybe there's some of these spaces where I have this sense of internal safety of not giving up my, support systems for a partner anymore, or not, giving up my like yoga class or whatever to when my partner calls me and they want to do something with me, right? So these moments where I didn't do anything wrong, but maybe now it's more important for me to hold on to these things that make me me, and that rebuilding of self that happens after, this rupture in a relationship.
Reminds me of what we are talking about a little bit with regard to boundaries and shifting toward that internal sense of empowerment, learning to trust ourselves. That you're absolutely on the money. That loss of trust in oneself, part of the psychological injury that partners experience in all this, being told time and time again that their reality, that they can't trust their own feelings, that they can't trust their own perceptions, that those perceptions are wrong or erroneous or mistaken. And so an essential part of the healing journey for betrayed partners is to learn to trust. I playfully call it the spidey, their own spidey sense sometimes. And now some of that, is where we seek out discernment from therapists, from some safe people, because of the trauma that they've been through. Sometimes it can feel like a threat is there in recovery, especially early recovery, but there's actually the relationship is actually safe. Right.
Hmm.
There's this felt sense that, oh, he's acting out again, or oh, he's lying to me again.
Hmm.
And so meeting that internal experience with skill while learning to pay attention to it and trust it, and sorting through what that feeling means. Okay. And then bringing that to our partner in a way that's relational. Hey, I'm afraid that you're watching porn again. And
Hmm.
hopefully the partner responds with empathy. Oh, yeah, I get it. That must be really scary for you. How can we work through this together? What do you need to see from me?
Hmm. Right.
Mm.
Yeah, and proactive communication is so important after betrayal too, is, I'm gonna go to the store, I'm gonna be gone for about 30, 45 minutes, right? I'm gonna text you when I leave and text you on my way back. Do you need anything from the store? Do you want me to, take pictures of some of the stuff I'm getting or whatever? And that might feel like a little bit overshare, over information to some people, but when you're working with people going through betrayal trauma, over communication is really essential to rebuilding the trust, because it's sort of lining up this something I can touch. Yes, that did happen, right? You did go to the store. You did get the things you said you. So each of those moments, it can resonate for that person who's experienced so much of this. What you said you were going to do didn't happen. And now when I communicate with you these things that I'm doing, and I'm reassuring you, I'm giving you this sense of safety again. And sometimes that takes months, sometimes that takes years, but it's a way to say I'm here and it's not happening again. And same thing, right, for this person internally. Of course, my nervous system thinks he's watching porn again. Of course, that's a natural emotion and experience to have. I don't need, I don't always need the external validation of that to internally validate that I have the right to feel this way.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
and then when I communicate with my partner and my partner responds to me with empathy and understanding, then we both have responded to me with empathy and understanding. And
Mm.
that is the catharsis, so the opposite of what we experienced before, which is me dismissing myself and you dismissing me.
Oh, man, I love that. That's such a good point. Hmm. Yeah. So we talk about this a lot with those who are in recovery. It's the betraying partner's job to proactively be transparent, volunteering information about their whereabouts, about what's going on in the present, so that the betrayed partner can learn to trust that they're doing what they say they're going to do, so that they can start to trust that by observing their partner's behavior, that they can be trustworthy. And that includes, and I cannot stress this enough, that includes for the betraying partner learning to recognize how they were deceptive, how they were manipulative, how they were scapegoating, how they were blame shifting, gaslighting, all of those yucky behaviors, right? It is critical to learn what they are and stop them.
Hmm.
Just as it's important for the betrayed partners to start to learn some of these terms and a little bit more about what this means, which is why we're having this conversation, so that they can start to put more words to a very confusing internal
Experience.
experience, right? Because in naming that reality, then they can start to feel empowered about, oh, I can do something about this now, or I can make a request. Hey, I'm feeling your behavior right now feels like, when you say that, it feels like the blame shifting or the gaslighting that used to happen between us.
Hmm.
And then we address that relationally.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Jenean, I wish we had more time, but we've crammed so much already into these two conversations. I want to thank you again for being here. I know it's early for you on the West Coast, so I really appreciate you joining me today. Thank you again.
Of course. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Compassionate Recovery Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad that you chose to spend this time with us. I'm grateful that you're here. If you heard something that resonated with you, please feel free to share this episode with someone who might need to hear it. And be sure to subscribe wherever you listen so that you never miss an episode. To connect with us, please check out cicfreeconsult.com so that you can schedule a free consultation with one of our therapists or coaches. We are standing by here to support you. Wherever you are in your healing journey, we're here to help. Recovery is hard work. You don't have to do it alone. Help is just a free consultation away. So until we see each other again, remember, healing is always possible.